The Atheist Debates Patreon Project presents Dear John, Part 5, Epilogue. I released 4 videos last month, all of them about someone going by the name of John who was sending me messages on Patreon and pledging to become a donating patron in order to get me to address their points. And I released those 4 videos going through in pretty good detail everything that was wrong with that person's, with John's arguments. And we covered quite a lot of ground. I remember we covered the Tower of Babel and Sodom and Gomorrah and Adam and Eve and genetics and, chariots and all sorts of things where he had just clearly bought into the nonsense from the Institute for Creation Research and other organizations that are promoting a particular narrative about the history of the world and what evidence is actually there. I have a 5-part series of messages that he sent after those videos, which I'm going to put up and I'm going to read/skim through. We're not going to go clicking on all the links, but I thought this would be a good way to wrap this up because we're not going to do any more content from John. It feels too much like I'm beating up on someone who isn't equipped to have these conversations at all. So after I posted those 4 videos, John replied and said, "Thanks for not only replying, but for spending the time to make 4 videos on your channel to reply as well. And yes, I'm a legit Christian. Your responses are unfortunately hypocritical arguments." Now he's going to say hypocritical a lot. And he's going to claim that my arguments are hypocritical, and that proves his original point. His original point was to make claims about genetics and Adam and Eve and all this other stuff. It wasn't anything about hypocritical arguments in this sense, but he thinks atheists are being hypocritical when we point out, because he doesn't understand the God of the gaps. We went through that in detail. And when we point out that you can't just say, oh, here's a gap in our knowledge, you need to insert God in it. He thinks the same thing is happening with science. And so he says, you mention evolution as a counter argument, but you ignore how evolution is a gap argument. What explains this? Probably evolution. See, he seems to think that we need an explanation for the diversity of life, so we just pulled evolution out of our butt rather than pointing to the actual evidence. He goes on to suggest that chromosome 2 is claimed to have been a fusion site because apes have 48 chromosomes and humans have 46, and that's so it was assumed chromosome 2 contains that fusion site. It wasn't assumed. It was explored and demonstrated that chromosome bears the hallmarks of a fusion of telomeres, and you can go research that. He continues with the biggest problem is the fact that we have 13 other sites in our genome that look like the apparent fusion site on chromosome 2, which means we had 14 fusions in the past, which means humans had 74 chromosomes while apes had 48. No, I'm afraid you're wrong again. If you went to go take a look at those sites that also look like they may have had fusions in the past, the other apes have those too. But even to the extent where that may not be the case, you can't then conclude how many fusion events took place and how many chromosomes there were, and then claim that this somehow makes us not connected in a lineage when all of the best available evidence shows that we are connected. He said, I also mentioned the age of the earth, but the age of the earth is another hypocritical argument that atheists, and he always does this apostrophe S. He doesn't seem to understand that atheists, plural, you just put an S, not an apostrophe. But he claims that atheists use yet another hypocritical argument by talking about the age of the earth. They ignore the millions of place fossils that disprove the ages. There aren't millions of fossils that disprove the age of the earth. As a matter of fact, there are no fossils that disprove the age of the Earth. There are fossils that are found outside of the normal strata, and creationists will try to suggest that this disproves the age of the Earth. But this is cherry picking little bits of information to suggest that it overturns the bulk of all the information that's actually out there. He continued by saying, you also said there's no evidence of humans needing to have popped into existence, even though you need to have heart surgery performed on you because you have things you can't live without. That sentence makes no sense. It says, I said there's no evidence of humans needing to have popped into existence. That's true. There's no evidence that humans needed it to pop into existence. It doesn't even make sense to talk about humans popping into existence. But he says, even though you need to have heart surgery performed on you because you have things you can't live without. Yes, there are lots of things I can't live without. He continues, you are once again being a hypocrite because if you honestly believed what you mentioned in your video, then you would never visit a doctor. What a load of crap. I visited a doctor because I value life. That has nothing to do with whether or not humans needed to pop into existence or anything else about the origins of life. It's about me enjoying and appreciating life. We also see that, he continues, we also see this outright confirmed every single day. If what you said is true, then stillborns and SIDS wouldn't happen, which are infants that died shortly after birth, usually due to missing an important part of their genome. I don't know how the hell that relates to what I supposedly said, but it doesn't make any sense. There's nothing about the facts of biology that suggest that there wouldn't be infant deaths. As a matter of fact, the facts of biology suggest that there would be infant deaths. This is what happens when genes change, when other conditions arise. Unfortunately, that leads to death. I don't understand why he seems to think that the facts of biology somehow, I don't know, he labels everything hypocritical. But he continues with a follow-up message saying, this will be my last message unless you have questions. Now, I'd like to note that I didn't ask any questions after this, but he continued to contact me. I wanted to give a bit of backstory as to why I originally sent you the message to begin with. I used to be an atheist myself and used to watch channels like yours, RN Raw, Paul, etc., pretty regularly back in 2013 to 2014, and wanted to look into more of what atheists mentioned in their videos and quickly realized that most of what is mentioned in atheist videos counted as one of four things. Their claims were either a misconception, a faulty argument, a bias, a hypocritical point of view, or speaking from ignorance. So he's saying, and not demonstrating and not pointing out any fallacies, but he's saying that atheist videos count as either misconceptions, either we don't understand what we're talking about, faulty arguments, although he doesn't demonstrate any faulty arguments, bias or hypocritical point of view, which he continues to accuse us of and yet never points to anything, or speaking from ignorance. And while speaking from ignorance is something that we all have to do because we don't know everything, what we're seeing here from John is somebody who doesn't understand what a logical argument is, doesn't understand the nature of evidence, doesn't understand science, doesn't understand how to analyze arguments, doesn't understand how to point out flawed thinking or fallacies in argument. He just decided after watching this atheist content that it's all just crap. And he continues, two perfect examples of that would be how some of the most popular videos on your channel talk about slavery and why Christians shouldn't fear hell, mainly because the Bible apparently never mentions hell, yet there's thousands of verses claiming slavery is immoral and 160 references to hell in the New Testament. Some of your most popular content is false. Well, I'm sorry that he doesn't understand some of my most popular content, but it seems that John has incredibly poor reading and video comprehension. There are not thousands of verses claiming that slavery is immoral. There are verses that specifically advocate and allow for slavery and permit slavery, which I covered thoroughly in that video. John doesn't present any of the thousands of verses that he claims are opposed to slavery, and neither does any other Christian apologist. John does not know the Bible or doesn't care to, or John is a fraud. I don't know. But he swears that he's sincere. And the other one that he claims is one of the most popular is how Christians shouldn't fear hell. I haven't looked at the popularity, but I did do a lecture on hell at a place in Florida. And I've done a couple lectures on hell. I didn't think they were any among my most popular. And I don't know that the key point was that Christians shouldn't fear hell, mainly because the Bible never mentions hell. No, it's not clear what the Bible does or doesn't have to say about hell. But my point, which I've been as clear as I can be on, is that you don't have any reason to fear hell because you don't have a good reason to think that any such place exists. So John, even when I clearly put forward ideas that I don't fear hell because I don't think it exists, misunderstands it and says, I don't fear hell because the Bible apparently never mentions it. That's not true. He continues, I then began looking into all this and realized that there is data backing up the Bible. Yes, God still technically needs to be proven, like you mentioned in part 3 of 4, but that's besides the point, because atheists usually don't mention that, but rather demand there is no historical data backing it all up, which is an outright lie. Well, if you're going to just say it's an outright lie and not actually spend any time demonstrating that it's an outright lie, then I'll just say, nuh-uh, John. I mean, one of your other Patreons even linked the Tower of Babel in your comments, but you ignored it and still uploaded the video demanding it doesn't exist. It looks like you're being arrogant. Anyways, fast forward to recently. I recently spent a night in a hotel and wanted to watch TV, but nothing was on, so I pulled out the Bible they have and noticed it had "This is a work of fiction" on a bunch of the pages throughout the Bible. Ignoring if it's fiction or not, even you should realize that that shouldn't happen. No, I don't realize that shouldn't happen. It's not what I would necessarily do, but the Bibles are left in the room for you to take. You can just take it. But if you want to leave it behind, you can. And if you want to leave it behind with a message, I have absolutely no problem at all. Other than it may be asserting that something is fiction when you can't actually demonstrate that it's fiction. And so logically there is a problem there. But as far as writing in a Bible, I don't care if you write it. I don't care if you rip pages up and roll your weed in it. The Bible is just a book. He said, I can't even read the Bible by myself anymore without atheists getting involved. Well, why did you have to rely on a hotel Bible that somebody else marked in, John? I mean, John, if your complaint is that you were in a hotel and you wanted to read the Bible, but atheists got in the way there by including information in the Bible that you don't like, why didn't you have your own Bible, John? Why didn't you go to a website with a Bible? Why were you relying, if you're such a dedicated Christian who wants to read their Bible in peace, why is it that you're reading the Gideon Bible that some atheist marked up for you? Seems to me like you don't seem to understand that a lot of these are you problems, and you just want to run around blaming everybody else. But he continues, my point for mentioning all this is I very rarely even talk to someone about religion, and I get treated like absolute shit, and sometimes can't even read the Bible in private either without being ridiculed. I had enough of that nonsense, especially since almost everything channels like yours mention is in one way or another wrong. This is John's continued trend of claiming that I'm wrong without demonstrating that I'm wrong at all. He continues by saying, I messaged you because you're one of the more vocal channels, yet your response wasn't to chat with me about it, nor to look into subjects I mentioned, which is a lie. I did look into subjects. I did 4 videos after looking into the subject specifically to make sure that I was correct. But he says, I just spent hours of my time making videos that try to make him look bad. I don't have to try to make you look bad, John. Every word out of your mouth makes you look bad. In front of your 20,000 viewers, way more than that, but that's how many had seen it when you first saw it. You could have spent those hours doing something productive. I did spend those hours doing something productive, John. I spent those hours putting together a video so that other people who are as confused as you are, but who maybe are willing to listen a little bit more, might find out that the bad information that you have and the bad information you got from places like the Institute for Creation Research need to be expunged, that they make you look like a gullible fool without much ability to comprehend. Instead of how can I make money off this, or how can I make him look bad? I didn't set out to make you look bad, John. You sent me a bunch of content. This is the reason I said I was going to make debunking videos. Your viewers look towards you for guidance, and if you treat religious people like shit sometimes, even if it's justified, then please remember your viewers will only act 10 times worse. Well, that's ridiculous. How dare you suggest that my viewers aren't able to act better than me? You're just being a little troll, John. I'm still contemplating if I should make one as a response to your videos. Yes, go ahead, John. Make debunking videos. Actually provide some evidence and argument, some facts that demonstrate what you're saying. Because just repeatedly asserting that I'm wrong is ridiculous. Towards the end there, he mentions, I'm mentioning that because even if you're correct with everything you mentioned in your responses, you likely aren't, though, then that still doesn't disprove Jesus nor God due to them being their own claims. This is why I'm done with John after this, because he doesn't understand the burden of proof. He looks at this motherload of information that he dumps out, all of which got debunked, all of which was wrong, factually. And then he says, even if you're right about all that, and I don't think you are, you didn't disprove Jesus. When at the very beginning, I set out to point out that it's not our job to disprove Jesus or God. It's your job to prove Jesus or God. And if you're doing it with misinformation, we're going to point that out. Now, I have two more clipped messages from him that I'll pop up here. The first one says, you were a decent debater when you originally started off, but somewhere down the line, you got so full of yourself that you literally changed your tactics from raising questions and actually addressing possible flaws to, I'm all right, right? So shut the fuck up attitude. Your massive ego is blinding you from the fact that you live in an echo chamber of myths. This is from someone who can't construct the sentence, doesn't know where an apostrophe goes, doesn't understand logic, doesn't understand God of the gaps, doesn't understand science, sends me a bunch of factually confusing information. I then sit down and do research and produce 4 videos going through exactly what's wrong with his claims. And he wants to suggest that what I'm really doing is saying, I'm all right, right? So shut the fuck up. He says he wants to point to a video where I say I wouldn't change my mind because they've arrived at religion via unlogical reasoning. He doesn't understand context because as long as the reasoning wasn't logical, I'm not going to accept it. If in fact there was good logical argument supported by evidence for the existence of a God, I would accept it. He said, I'm lying when I say I'm open-minded. I'm not lying when I say I'm open-minded. I'm just not open to your crap where you provide misinformation. The last one is where he says that he's going to give me a rebuttal because he's like, you wanted a rebuttal, so here's a quick rebuttal. Wikipedia's article clearly states what I mentioned, but you lied in your video demanding it doesn't state what I mentioned. And then he quotes the thing that doesn't state what he mentioned. His reading comprehension is so poor that he does not understand that. He continues down later on when he talks about the Tower of Babel by linking to a video from Aaron Ra, claiming that the Tower of Babel is a place you can visit. What Aaron's referencing is something that some modern scholars have suggested is the foundation for the Tower of Babel story. That is not necessarily true. It may be the foundation for that myth. It may not be the foundation for that myth. Aaron could be correct, and he's certainly correct to say that if he had said, hey, some modern scholars think this tower dedicated to Marduk is the foundation for the story of Babel, but you can't demonstrate that it in fact is the foundation for the story of Babel. And if you're going to point to Aaron pointing to a tower to Marduk and say, look, even Aaron acknowledges the Tower of Babel is a place you can visit, then I'm sorry, John, you've just done the most stupid thing, which is to shoot yourself in the foot. Because now you would have to then agree with Aaron that this place, this failed beginning of a tower dedicated to the god Marduk, is the foundation for the myth in the Bible that there is a tower, was a Tower of Babel, which God made people run from after making them scatter after changing and confounding their languages. So which is it, John? Is the Bible correct and there's an actual Tower of Babel, which doesn't exist and we can't point to? Or is there a Babylonian tower to Marduk, which some people claim is the foundation for the Tower of Babel myth that is in your book? John doesn't understand that he can't just point to someone who agrees with a little piece of what he says and then conclude that therefore it's all true. It's incredibly sloppy thinking, and it's exhausting to, while I've been in recovery, get message after message after message after message saying, this is my last message and you're a lying hypocrite and please tell your viewers the truth. I don't know if John's for real. At this point, I don't care because we won't be dealing with John anymore. I will still take bad arguments, good arguments, whatever people are tossing at me to try and get the word out there. But this, some of you will be happy to see, is the end of the conversation with John.